Flemish composer portraits. Hendrik Tobi.
Composer and clarinetist. Of course, we are immensely proud of him at home. And that's not just because he's my brother. I can assure you that Hendrik Tobi is one of the best composers in Antwerp. The way he can fill out a stave with black and white dots takes your breath away. I told you that he wrote a tune for us, the Town Trumpeters, but there's more to it than that. He writes quite a lot of music for St. Jacob's as well as St. Andries, including motets and even masses. After he married Annemie, Rick upped stakes and moved to De Meyer Street, which in your days has somehow become May Street. His children were all christened in St. Jacob's, where he used to brighten up the service with his music. At the same time, he continued to play music in St. Andries, the parish church of the infamous Book Passage. That was not far from Lepelstraat, which had a special reputation in my time. Lepelstraat lies on the southern side of the town and runs parallel to the esplanade of the citadel. The street is chock-a-block with brothels and beggars. Rick's youngest son, Jan, was a choir boy in St. Andries, so now and then Rick writes a bit of music for that church too. Ricky's favourite instrument, though, is the clarinet, and he also writes music for it. The clarinet is relatively new, although we already knew it well when we were kids. I remember him experimenting on the clarinet in his early 20s and eventually became known as a clarinet virtuoso here in Antwerp. If you ask me, that's why they made him a town player without having to do the exams. When my brother joined them, the town pipers had 4 clarinets and 2 bassoons, and he was the best of them all. He takes his instrument along to the town's ballroom orchestras, both large and small, and to the almoners' orchestra. And it's not just that. He plays oboe and horn as well, and when he joins the musicians in St. Jacob's, he often takes a turn on the cello. It's not unusual for a musician to play several different instruments, but it's the clarinet that's really his thing, and he gives lessons on it as well. When my brother first tried it out, the clarinet had been around for about 50 years. As long ago as 1720, the Antwerp composer-priest, Johann Adam Faber, wrote a mass for the Assumption of Our Lady, which was performed in the Cathedral of Our Lady, and featured an interesting and relatively challenging score for clarinet. My brother was only 18 when Faber died, but the aging cleric still attended the domestic concerts of Antwerp's nobility, to which Rick was also invited, even back then. As I said, my brother likes writing for his favourite instrument. In 1772, he published 6 trios for clarinet, violin, and basso continuo. It is elegant music that compares favourably with what was internationally available for that combination. He even found a Parisian publisher, Le Menu, prepared to publish them. Le Menu specialised in chamber music and opera arrangement and could guarantee distributions in all of France and even further afield. Hendrik paid for the publication and persuaded his friends and colleagues to buy copies for themselves. Van Hoof, Rick's best friend, bought a copy, as did Johann Hofnagels, who was the town's carillonneur. But so did De Ligne and Van Eekhout, his fellow clarinetists and town players. These pieces were featured in the sale catalogue of Le Menu from 1772 to 1788. So these clarinet trios must have had some success, although it's true that there was not that much music available for that particular combination of instruments at the time. One of the subscribers included a certain Charles de Prolly. De Prolly would finance the publication of Rick's second collection of music a few years later. This second volume was published as Opus 2 in Antwerp by Van den Berg. These pieces were scored for 2 clarinets and a bassoon, Although, in a note on the title page, Rick comments that the piece can also be played by 2 violins and a basso continuo. Charles de Prolly was a multifaceted Antwerp-based entrepreneur and banker with Genoese roots. He lived in a splendid palace on Schoenmarkt, which had views of the greenery of the cemetery, which you now know as Groenplatz. His palace often rang with the sound of my brother's clarinet. De Prolly had money running out of his ears, and financing a collection of chamber music by a composer he looked favourably upon was a bagatelle for him. Just keeping his wardrobe spick and span cost him 19,000 guilders a year. Plantin, the printer, records that he would have to work for 50 years for such a sum. He owned a splendid collection of paintings and a couple of country estates out of town. As banker of the emperor, he was granted the title of Admiral of the Scheldt as a New Year's gift. Until shortly before his death, he was one of the richest and most influential people in Antwerp, whom many of the rich and famous enjoyed visiting. On such occasions, my brother used to be invited to come and play music. From about 1780 on, Rick bought his clarinets from his friend Jan Tollings in Mechelen. Together with his son Cornelis, Jan ran a business that in the 80s employed about 40 people. Tollings is still a well-known name in the instrument-building world, and the firm's clarinets and oboes were sent all over Europe. Thanks to my brother, Tollings sold quite a few instruments in Antwerp as well. After all, Mechelen is not that far from Antwerp. Take the diligence, and you're there in just 3 hours, although the coach is not a very comfortable way of travelling. The journey is boring, and taking a nap is impossible because even if the weather is fine and the road is good, you will still be shaken up like a pea in a drum. The more relaxed way is doing it by barge. The barges are wide and comfortable and pulled along by a horse on the towpath next to the canal. When you are carrying good quality instruments like those made by Tollings, it is by far the wisest choice. However, it costs only half the price of a ticket for the diligence, but you do have to allow the time for it. You can easily take a day for the trip, but thanks to the excellent canals and natural waterways, it's by far the most enjoyable way of travelling. Once on board, you can have a chat with the other passengers, play cards, or simply smoke a pipe and watch the landscape slipping by at 7 kilometers an hour. You can finally make out the spire of the Cathedral of Our Lady as Antwerp slides into view. What a sight to welcome a body home.